Hey everyone, it's Kyle. Azor Ahai. Well, it looks like Emilia Clarke was right, everyone. Episode 5, the penultimate episode of Game of Thrones, proved to be the most explosive and mental episode to date. It was named The Bells, which has some prominent connections to two classic literary pieces, the poems From Whom the Bell Tolls by John Donne and The Bells by Edgar Allan Poe. So let's take a look at these two writings and see how they apply to Daenerys' life thus far. Donne's piece is mainly about how humans are all connected and how death affects us all. These themes are prominent in Game of Thrones, and in Sunday's episode, we see how the breakdown of that connection can result in tragedy. Daenerys has always been the outsider. She was seen as a foreigner in Essos and Westeros, despite her established ancestry on both continents. Donne says that no man is an island, but at the beginning of episode 5, we see Dany on the island of Dragonstone alone save for Tyrion. After the deaths of Rhaegal and Missandei, Dany has cut herself off from everyone, attempting to make an island of herself. This disconnect continues as Dany realizes that her remaining advisors have been whispering behind her back about Jon Snow's claim to the Iron Throne. She ends up executing Varys in this episode because he attempts to overthrow her in favor of Jon Snow, which is another connection severed. Dany desperately tries to reconnect with Jon in episode 5, and it is plain to see that she wants to belong somewhere and have a sense of home. But this doesn't exist for her in this moment. When Jon rejects her, Dany seems to reach that final resolution, and she wants it to be fear. The loneliness inside of her morphs into coldness and lack of warmth, which is ironic considering her motto of fire and blood. Leading up to the destruction of King's Landing, Dany experiences multiple losses which fall under Donne's line, "Each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind." The Dany we see on the walls of King's Landing is not the same one we saw for Westeros at the end of Season 6. She is diminished due to her losses. On top of that, she hasn't gained the love of the Westerosi smallfolk, and she doesn't connect with them, making her feel more alone. These events all lessen her #1 desire to take the Iron Throne and save the people of Westeros from tyranny. At some point on the walls of King's Landing, Dany's disconnect and diminished desires pushes her to a point of no return. She destroys everything and unleashes carnage upon the city. Donne's poem brings about the idea that each man is important in the fabric of mankind, and the destruction of even one makes mankind less. The massacre at King's Landing, at least for now, has lessened the power of Westeros and Daenerys Stormborn herself. The final lines of Donne's poem read, "Therefore send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." The bells that Donne is referring to are funeral bells in this scenario. This connects to the series because the bells of King's Landing have rang out for many reasons. Just before the Battle of Blackwater, Varys tells Tyrion that he's always hated bells because they ring for horror, a dead king, and a city under siege.
I've always hated the bells. They ring for horror. A dead king, a city under siege.
A wedding.
Exactly.
This more than likely means that even weddings can be considered a horrible event. And we have had some crazy weddings with the red and purple weddings that occurred in seasons 3 and 4. It is an arguable fact that the bells of King's Landing have quite possibly rung more for circumstances around and leading to the death of anything else. Jon Arryn, Robert Baratheon, Ned Stark, Joffrey Baratheon, and Tommen Baratheon as well. These death bells have been prominent in the series, but have never rang out in surrender. For Dany, who has lost so much, the bells fall on deaf ears and she is transformed from the savior of the oppressed to the harbinger of death. King's Landing's chance to surrender has passed, and the bells now toll for something else, the death of a city. Perhaps the bells of King's Landing were also tolling to predict another death, the death of Daenerys Targaryen. After recent events, how can she possibly survive this series? She didn't save the city, she razed it and destroyed it. 300 years ago, Aegon the Conqueror established a monarchy, the heart of it all being on the ground he landed on with Balerion the Black Dread. Now it's a wasteland of ashes, and King's Landing was essentially the legacy of House Targaryen. But now, that's dead. Daenerys has killed it, leaving her and Drogon with only pieces. I believe we can also look to the other poem that we mentioned earlier, The Bells by Edgar Allan Poe, a writer who usually touched on the theme of madness and unreliable narrators, both of which are prominent in A Game of Thrones and the book series A Song of Ice and Fire. In his poem, Poe aptly describes the sound of various bells as they ring and represent different phases in life, and I think we can apply these bells and phases to Daenerys Targaryen's journey. The first set of bells are silver bells that lightly tinkle along with the stars that twinkle. We could easily see this as a happier part of Daenerys' childhood when she lived with Sir William Darry in the House with the Red Door. These silver bells could also be applied in Dany's life as the foreshadowing of her marriage to Khal Drogo, who wears little silver bells in his braid as a sign of victory. In the books, these silver warrior bells can be heard from far away as the Dothraki approach, and it's important to note that later Dany begins to wear these silver bells in her hair to symbolize her victories. The next stanza talks of a different set of bells, the golden bells of a wedding. I can't help but think of Daenerys and Khal Drogo's wedding and marriage as well. Although Dany was petrified on her wedding day, it seemed to be mostly a joyous occasion. The poem continues saying, "What a world of happiness their harmony tells," which applies to the promising future of the silver-haired Khaleesi and her cow. Of course, they have an unborn child, which was supposed to be the stallion who mounts the world, and Poe describes the sound of the bells as molten golden notes, a description that alludes to the death of Viserys via the Golden Crown. In the third stanza, Poe describes Alarum bells that shriek a tale of terror. The mood changes quickly, much like Daenerys and Drogo's life in the Khalasar. In no time, Dany goes from having it all, loving her husband, the promise of a child, the support of those people, to nearly nothing at all. She is stripped of everything in the span of several days, most of which she spends in a fever state. When she recovers, everything else is changed. The bells in the poem are ringing because of a fire that grows bigger every moment, which can relate to Daenerys' growing power after hatching the dragon eggs in Drogo's funeral pyre. Like the bells, Mirri Maz Duur shrieks as she is killed in the same fire, her death being part of the blood price for Dany's new children, Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion. Poe's third stanza can also be applied to Daenerys' time in Westeros. Where her growing fire was a cleanse upon the corrupted slave cities in Essos, it doesn't seem to do the same in Westeros. Poe eerily says that the fire is leaping higher and higher with a desperate desire, which perfectly describes Daenerys' campaign in Westeros. She listens to her advisors, but none of their ideas bring her a victory over Cersei. Daenerys becomes desperate and brings fire and blood to the fields near Blackwater Rush. The biggest connection between Poe's poem and Daenerys is in the third and fourth stanzas. As I mentioned before, the bells of the third stanza ring because of a fire, and in episode 5, the bells of King's Landing ring out in a declaration of surrender. But as Dany listens to the bells and stares at the Red Keep, there is hurt and rage in her eyes, pure, raw, fiery emotion, and she takes flight to set the world below on fire. Poe speaks of the fire as it is in danger with ebbs and flows, which mimics Drogon's breathing fire in pulsing streaks over King's Landing. Now, Poe's final stanza describes iron bells which are solemn. The frantic chaos caused by alarm bells has settled down, and the melancholy meaning of their tone can only mean one thing, which is death. As the stanza continues, Poe talks of ghouls who ring the iron bells in triumph and how the sound is almost like that of stone rolling over the human heart. The king of the ghouls, which could also be described as the Grim Reaper or the bringer of death, surveys the land that has been decimated and his merry bosom swells. If we apply this to Daenerys, this could possibly be what we see at the start of the show's final episode. Daenerys could be interpreted as the king or queen of ghouls, and in the trailer we see her step out to survey the destruction that she has caused. Is Dany happy with what she has accomplished? Now that she has dismounted from Drogon, will she see the raising of King's Landing as a victory? Will she celebrate, or will the new queen of ghouls be destroyed for her actions? For such a simple episode titled The Bells inspires many complex thoughts and connections with pieces of literature, specifically Dunn's For Whom the Bell Tolls and Poe's The Bells, both of which can be applied to Daenerys' character trajectory. Perhaps throughout this comparison and analysis we can understand the Mother of Dragons in her most dangerous moment of the series and predict what we will see in the final episode of A Game of Thrones. But what do you think? Will Daenerys meet her end in the finale, and could we see her funeral? Will we see a wedding and perhaps another wedding style of event and final twist in the finale? Let me know your thoughts, your theories, and tinfoil in the comment section. A big thank you to Amy for helping me make this video. Let's show some hype and love to Amy in the comment section. Also, a lot of you have been asking the same question. Hey Kyle, what are you going to do after Game of Thrones ends? Well, I got an answer for you. I'm going to be making videos. This is my passion. I absolutely love making videos and having conversations with all of you. I will be doing Game of Thrones book content. I'm going to cover Fire and Blood, which I'm really excited to talk about. I've been saving that for after the season. I'm also going to take a look at some Winds of Winter sample chapters, and whenever Winds of Winter and the second volume of Fire and Blood comes out and A Dream of Spring comes out, I'm going to cover those as well whenever that happens. So, yeah, we're going to be doing more Game of Thrones content as well. I'm going to be doing a Game of Thrones rewind, kind of going back to episode 1 and going throughout the series again. I don't know if any of you are interested in that, but I thought that would be a cool idea. And I've also been toying with the idea of doing an audio-only podcast and doing that once a week or twice a week and kind of continuing with that. I will still be doing some live streams, but I thought doing an audio-only podcast would be really awesome. So I hope all of you who have subscribed for Game of Thrones content will stay, and will continue to enjoy content on the channel because I'm going to continue creating it. Also, I want you to know that your voice matters, and I'm always trying to improve. I'm always willing to listen to new ideas, so if you have ideas for stuff that you want to see on the channel, please leave it in the comment section. I'm really excited to be creating new content as well. I'm going to be covering Marvel. I'm going to start with that next week, talking about Spider-Man Far From Home and Avengers Endgame and all the upcoming Phase 4 stuff in the Marvel MCU. And of course, Disney Plus is going to have a bunch of awesome shows with Loki and all that. So I'm really excited to cover Marvel, but also The Expanse. I'm going to be covering that. That's my second favorite show after Game of Thrones. I'm going to talk about the upcoming shows, of course, the Game of Thrones prequel. There's going to be news for that. The Watchmen, The Mandalorian, the Lord of the Rings show, which I'm really excited about. So Wheel of Time, I think, is coming out too now on Amazon. So there's going to be lots of stuff to cover on the channel, and we're going to kind of spread our wings and do some more fun stuff on the channel and look at other awesome movies and television. Also, there are other ways you can help support the channel and content creators like myself, including Patreon. It helps people like me be able to make videos full time. So you can sign up for as little as $1 a month, and you get to help the channel grow in a special way. You get, for me, for my patrons, you get early access to my audio recordings. You get, early access to my script ideas, Patreon only polls, special collaborations. So if you do want to support the channel and help the Hype and Love continue to grow, you can check out the link to my Patreon in the description of this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Hype and Love.